Hello, and welcome to this Inven Global panel. We're here today to talk about innovation on the blockchain. I won't do anyone the disservice of introducing them for them, so I'd like to just give up the panel now to the floor to let everyone introduce themselves, talk about where they're currently working, and then also how the company they work at or for has adopted or brought Web3 and blockchain technology into their company. So why don't we start with Arnold?
Hey guys, my name is Arnold Hur. I'm the CEO of Genji. And what was the last part of that?
Just talk about how you at Gen G, how have you implemented blockchain
Sure.
technology, Web3 tech into your business?
To be very honest, like I don't think we've integrated any blockchain technology into our business. The things that we have done is start learning about the space, and making sure that we're trying to do it as responsibly as possible. So we got one of the first sponsorships in Asia, with one of the few regulated financial exchanges, called Bithumb. So they're one of our key sponsors around a few of our teams. But in terms of the actual technology integration, we haven't done anything yet, but we're actively looking at the space and trying to understand it better. I would think there's a lot to learn, and I have more of a tech background, so I've been trying to aggressively learn as much as I can.
Very cool. Why don't Andrew, you go next?
Yeah, absolutely. Apologies for not having a webcam today, but having some low bandwidth issues in Southeast Asia. I'm the program lead for esports and content creators at Sky Mavis. We're the creators of Axie Infinity, currently the leading blockchain game that exists right now. We have our own blockchain called Ronin, where all of our action happens at. Right now, I'm wearing a lot of hats as we transition from startup to kind of more of a full-blown traditional game developer status. We're starting to experiment quite a bit with esports. I think for us, esports is about token distribution on a high level and trying to distribute tokens in a very meaningful way to maximize the potential impact of our DAO and get those tokens in the hands of players that, at least by our thesis, are hopefully more likely to really care about the governance, want to hang on to those tokens rather, and control some of their own destiny when it comes to esports. So we're at the very, very beginning of that live experiment. We're just starting to run some of those initial tournaments, but so far so good, and it's been pretty interesting to navigate the potential here.
A lot of
Love it.
Hearthstone players have been crossing over to Axie Esports. Actually, I've noticed that.
Yeah, we've been seeing a number of card players start to transition. Some Magic the Gathering, actually some like Clash Royale, even some poker players. So it really does appeal to a wide variety of gamers out there. I think one of our bigger players that's been around for a while is actually an ex professional bridge player. So a lot of overlap, and it'll be interesting to see if we can start resonating with other traditional gamers, both in and outside of the card space. Like right now, Axie is still alpha, so we really have this one flagship game, Axie Origin, that's on the way. But we'll have a lot more other gaming experiences joining the ecosystem before long, and I think there's a lot of potential there that could be untapped. I come from the Dota 2 space. That game was born on the Warcraft 3 map editor. So it always makes me wonder, when you put these tools in the hands of the community, what might pop out.
Absolutely. And then last but certainly not least, Chris, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks. My name is Chris. I'm the CEO of Community Gaming. We are an esports competition platform. We're also an esports earnings platform. So you can come to our site and find tournaments for games like Axie on the Web3 side and tons of other Web3 games. And then you'll also see tons of tournaments for traditional esports like Valorant, League, a lot of mobile games like Free Fire. And the way we use Web3 is solving a very long-standing pain point around player payments. So whether you're a tournament creator using the site to create a tournament in under 5 minutes, or you're a player looking to monetize your time, all the payments are instant, they are cheap, and they're transparent. So no longer you have to wait on a 30-day invoice cycle. You can get paid right after your tournament's over. We also can create wallets for the users if you don't have one to link. So we're helping solve the onboarding issue. So you can have a non-custodial wallet generated for you. and there's no transaction fees. So a lot of people talk about, gas fees being very clunky and bad UX. We're trying to bring a Web 2 very clean UX, but all the benefits of Web 3. So we as the platform in the background take care of all of the transaction fees called meta transactions. So users don't have to worry about if they're claiming a payment or if they're setting up and deploying a tournament. They never see those pesky MetaMask pop-ups.
Love it. Great. Well, we can jump right in then. Now, I think something that's on a lot of people's minds, if you're like an esports native or you just follow the space quite closely, a lot of esports orgs have gotten into the blockchain and Web3 space within the past year, be it a sort of like NFT project, like 100 Thieves has done, for example, or if you're someone like Gen G and you've partnered with a cryptocurrency exchange or stuff like that. But there's been a lot of, call it backlash, call it negative reception overall to blockchain technology, cryptocurrencies getting into the esports space. Why do you feel that negativity has? Why do you think there's been such a negative reception to that coming into the space? I'll start with you first, Arnold.
You know, I actually really fully understand why the backlash exists. Because the way that we've talked about and wanted to approach this with the community was like every single thing that we do in the Web3 space, like I don't want it to be a forced in, which is kind of the feeling that as a gamer that you get is that you feel like you're forced into the space for no reason, right? And so for me, it's always kind of the concept of forced in versus I want this experience to be opt-in rather than forced in, right? And trying to figure out like what we can build with the community that does care rather than forcing something onto the community that doesn't want it. And I think one of the biggest reasons why gamers don't care or don't like this is because a lot of the Web3 initiatives are being forced in to the community and they haven't earned the right with honestly the majority of crypto games today are awful. So as a gamer, I've just not gotten any information or any idea why I should care about something when I care about games and you're telling me to care about something else that I don't care about and you're forcing this on me. I would have backlash too. So I actually really think that a lot of the press and marketing, especially around some of these like rug pulls and a lot of that stuff that happened, it is actually sending the wrong message, and we're not doing any favors doing and working and forcing these things onto folks. And I actually think it's going to get. I actually think it's a clear message from the gaming community right now that doing the Gen 1 of what we saw in the Web3 space isn't going to cut it, right? And I think it's very loud. But one thing that did resonate was like I kind of viewed it as a start to a conversation, right? Even with our fan base, on our Discord, when I talk to our fans, I was very honest. We're in Overwatch League. That team at this point until Overwatch 2 launches, hopefully, it's a really hard team to get a sponsorship for. And one of the biggest things that we want to do as an organization that we believe in and the vision we believe in is that we want to help gamers earn a living, whether you're a content creator, whether you're a student trying to get a scholarship into university, or whether you're a pro player, right? And I said, look, guys, it's a really tough market out there, and we need the sponsorship if we're going to pay the players. And when I actually was able to talk to the community about how this is helpful and how this actually helps pay for these players, they were like, all right, we get it, right? Especially, and I think in the Asia community, it was much more well received in terms of understanding why it's happening, and they understood that's how you pay your players. Versus, I think in the Western community, especially with the Overwatch community, it was a clear, no, we don't want this, right? And it's almost like a scary battle that's going on between the crazy crypto bros versus the folks that absolutely hate this. And like, I kind of view it as like until there's something really great that's enticing for gamers, there's this backlash will continue, and I fully understand why it's happening.
So I
Yeah,
agree.
I think
go
Can
ahead,
I
Chris,
jump in?
please.
So I agree on the point about forcing, right? I think as more and more high quality games come to market and players get their hands on them, I think you'll see this middle ground where there's a free-to-play experience, right? It's a free-to-play game, just like Axie Origins is free to play, and then you can opt in to buying assets that would, be NFTs, and they're going to be more expensive. But you first get to try the game for free, right? Decide if you like it, and if you want to invest, if you want to have these property rights where you can actually retain value of these items, then you can choose to do that at a later date. But the game itself has to be a fun experience fundamentally, and then those ownership features, the earning features, are purely additive to that experience, right? And then the other point I have here is it's really kind of a branding issue in a sense, right? If people think about NFTs, right, this dirty three-letter acronym, and everyone goes crazy on Twitter as soon as they see that, a lot of them immediately jump to, this is $100,000 Bored Ape, right? Like that's what they think of, right? And if everyone thinks of NFT tech as some, just a picture with what they think is not a lot of utility, and they can't afford it, I would also not like NFT tech if that's all it was, if it had just, those limitations. So it's sort of a branding issue, and I think 100 Thieves actually did it quite well, right? They, first of all, they didn't call it an NFT, right? They called it a digital collectible. They made it completely free to claim, so that, there's no accusations of, it's money related, and they did it on Polygon, so there was no proof of work involved, right? There was no energy usage. So and they celebrated, most importantly, they celebrated fan achievement, right? It was saying like, we can't get you guys all, necklaces, but you guys can claim this and have it in your wallet forever. And then they have that attachment to those users if they ever do something, they announce the game, right? So I'm sure they can airdrop things onto all their fans in the future. So I think that was a really good example of doing it in a way that was low risk. They avoided, even calling it an NFT, and it didn't have any energy or environmental concerns.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all really great points there. Maybe I could to jump in real quick as well. I agree very much with the bad press. I think, unfortunately, and especially in our modern age of polarization, the stuff that gets the most clicks is generally what is most deconstructive, not necessarily constructive of pushing forward the actual technology. The actual tech and the complicated parts of it really aren't that sexy when it comes to headlines, but hacks and people losing money and really disastrous things are really what grab people's attention from almost like not clickbait, but from a high level like headline type perspective. So I definitely understand some of that skepticism. I often tell people that I follow the like 90-10 rule, that like 90% of crypto is terrible, and people with pretty bad intentions or a product that doesn't work or grossly overpromising. But that 10% that's remaining, that's where some of the best builders in the world are existing, where some of the smartest minds that see the potential of these decentralized tools. Maybe it's still early, but I think we're seeing more and more really smart engineers move from that centralized Web 2 world because they want to come into this decentralized Web 3 blockchain world that has slightly different tooling. And I think some potential to shift the paradigm where these game economies can actually put more money in the hands of the players and really flip that dialogue that traditionally was all about developers maximizing revenue from players, developers extracting from players. And in the case of Axie, our economy really is owned by the players. They choose when to breed Axies together to create new ones, when to list them on the market, and ultimately when to buy them from each other. We don't sell anything directly to our players anymore. I think that represents a big paradigm shift, but it does require a little bit of deep thought and thinking about those existing rails in the centralized gaming world to really start seeing some of the potential value. And of course, so many games leveraging their futures, as I like to call it, over-promising and under-delivering time and time again, that leaves a bad taste in people's mouths, even if there is a justifiable explanation of, hey, this technology is complicated, or we ran into this snag. Like, game development is hard. It has a lot of uncertainties, but still, gamers have a pretty high bar in terms of gaming experiences. And I think, like Arnold said, until Web3 games can kind of meet that experience, I think we're going to continue this cycle of extreme skepticism, and we'll struggle to get traditional gamers to kind of open their minds. But I also believe there's a network effect coming. I think as more like big game development studios and more of these very reputable type developers start to come into the space, it'll start to come into focus a little bit more for the folks out there that don't necessarily understand the technological side of it.
I think he brings up a great point here. I've noticed, and the reason why we're exploring the space so aggressively, and the reason why we even partnered with bit them was because like we wanted to understand the space better and we wanted to make sure that we're doing the right thing. But also, I've noticed just behind the scenes, all the best game development talent is moving into Web3 games. So for me, it's just a matter of time before they're able to actually create a game that's worthwhile and that's worth a gamer's attention. It's just that I think the first wave of stuff was kind of like, hey, it's basically like everybody's advertising their loot box game as a loot box game, right? It's the technology underlying it is really interesting if you're a technologist, but it's not interesting if you're just somebody who wants to play a great game, right? And it's kind of like the first wave of marketing and push was more for investors than I think gamers, and that's
Definitely.
kind of the corner that a lot of the Web3 gaming world backed themselves into, because to be honest, I think a lot of them were chasing kind of easy investor dollars, right? Now that it's not as easy, now they have to actually build a great experience. Like I'm actually much more excited about what's in the pipeline rather than what has been released so far, or Bored
Yeah,
Ape and all this stuff. And
it
the
takes
Twitter wars will continue to be Twitter wars.
it takes 3 to 4 years, like minimum, right, to create a real AAA quality game, right? So just by virtue of that, the games that are hitting the market first are not going to be, Riot games, like $50 million development budget with like 100 people on them, right? And they develop in secret for years before they announce everything, right? So just by virtue of that, it takes a long time to create a great game. So I'm also seeing that really good pipeline. I personally think a year from now, we're not going to be saying, there's not enough, all blockchain games are not good enough. I think there's going to be commoditized, high quality gameplay. I think a year from now, you're going to say, which Web3 first person shooter should I play? Like, which one is the best out of all you have to choose from? So, us as someone that works with the developer early, we're starting to work with a bunch of first person shooters as one example that 3-4 months ago, I wasn't even aware of. We did a big tournament series with EV.io. That's sort of like a Quake game. BR1, that's one that's like PUBG, Mini Royale, Undead Blocks, Shrapnel. Like as you were saying, these are all folks that have backgrounds from big studios, right? And then they've left. So in a year from now, when they all go into early alpha, early beta, you're going to have a lot to dig your hands into and to really understand, what this tech can do in an open game economy.
For me, there's also a big part of actual innovation that needs to take place. So like, for example, swapping out just traditional centralized skins for skins that exist in a decentralized marketplace. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's also not a terribly revolutionary innovation. It does add some digital property rights to gamers, but we already have these marketplaces kind of simulated in a really centralized way. And I think games that can try to find ways to integrate blockchain and NFTs in a slightly more meaningful manner. Like in the case of Axie, the Axies are NFTs and they're the actual game assets that you use to battle in the arena. You take 3 Axies, they're made up of these different parts. Each part correlates to a specific card, and then those cards are what enable the gameplay that feels, a little bit like a competitive card game that you've played in the past. So I think that is maybe closer to pushing the envelope of, hey, these are actual game assets that you're buying that aren't just purely cosmetic, but they're actually part of the core game loop. We're at the very tip of the iceberg, I think, in terms of an industry in that regard. And I'm excited to see more games start to experiment with, direct integration and actual utility for the NFTs beyond just purely cosmetic means. Again, nothing wrong with cosmetics, but I think that's a very small piece of the potential of the underlying technology.
So it feels clear to me that really the way that blockchain games or blockchain technology can really push to overcome its sort of more negative reputation within the gaming space right now is to create actual meaningful value to these gamers in more applicable ways than they've seen so far. Arnold, to your point about rug pulls, or Andrew, to your point about how can we innovate and create more meaningful things that drive value for players beyond just a skins market, for example, or something like that. But something else I want to touch on when it comes to what blockchain gaming has brought to the table is the innovation or the coming together of guilds to play these big games, like YGG, for example, being a big game or being a big guild behind Axie Infinity, for example. These people really coming together and finding value and community playing these games. And it harkens back to my time, when I was younger, playing RuneScape and being part of a guild, or playing, as part of a guild in WoW or stuff like that. And I guess the question here is, are guilds this next evolution of what we can expect to come from when it comes of like esports organizations? Do you think that esports organizations are gonna start to look more like guilds? Are guilds going to look more like esports organizations? How do we expect this innovation of guilds to evolve over time?
I can jump in
I
first.
could go
I
ahead,
know you
Chris.
wrote a really great blog post on this. Do you want to kick this off?
Yeah, maybe I can kick it off a little bit. I think it's interesting how we start to define those words, right? Like, what is an esports organization? What is a tournament organizer? What is a guild? And how are these clearly defined, or are they? Is it sort of a trilemma of Venn diagrams? In the Axie space, we've definitely seen guilds evolve a lot recently. Many of them didn't really have a business model to start. I think during the bull market, when it was very easy to extract a pretty significant amount of money just by playing the game because demand was outpacing supply, um, it was almost too easy to just say, hey, look at all this amazing revenue we're making. We have all these players, they're earning so much. This is so cool. But to me, that's just the first step. That's like the disruption point that unlocks the potential next level of whatever you're trying to build. And now we're seeing this really wide spectrum of guilds where there's some that are more on the altruism kind of charity side, where it's really just about maximizing social impact, however they see fit, whether that's through like trash cleanups or food drives, or medical donations or something. Then you have this far other side of the spectrum, like Team Meditate. 1437, an ex-pro Dota player, has come into the Axie space and basically morphed a guild into a budding esports team. And their whole thing is training this next generation of pro players, giving out coaching sessions, and that's a whole part of their business model, and really trying to push people towards the top of the leaderboard. And that opens up all sorts of potential sponsorship opportunities, content creation, that kind of stuff. We've seen some guilds in Axie that are just collectives of artists, people that want to be able to exchange notes and be in this creative bubble and work towards some sort of shared creative goal. So it's a really wide spectrum, and I think those that are thinking about the next level of what is the connection of this loop outside of just playing to earn and playing games in perpetuity, those are the ones that I think are starting to push the envelope and look to survive. And I think they are starting to hybridize. They're kind of guilds, they're kind of esports orgs, and some of them are also almost like little investment funds, to be perfectly honest. So curious to hear your thoughts on this, Chris.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not even calling them guilds anymore. I'm really calling them Web3 esports orgs. So I think you're going to see a lot more guilds start to sign content creators and have like actual pro players that build up individual brands, right? And not just focus on signing like tens of thousands of individual scholars, but to have kind of a cutoff point for that, and then focus on actually moving those best players up and to create their own brands. And so I think guilds have a lot to borrow from esports, but I think it goes both ways as well. So I think that esports orgs, they need to diversify their business models, right? Like I think we saw this pretty clearly in COVID, that they're extremely reliant on sponsorship and in-person events, and if that dries up, or if sponsorships pull back, like it can be bad, right? So we really need to have a lot of these esports teams look more into similar things like guild tech, right? Guild tech is guilds that build out data and analytics dashboards to like find out who the best players are, right? They can query a whole game's like on-chain data. They can, imagine if you could just like query like World of Warcraft's like database and just be like, oh, what's the shift in the meta happening? Who's like, what are the armor that people are acquiring? There's so much you can do when a lot of this data is on chain, and you can just look at everyone's wallets. So there's things like that, and then there's more like financial services. Andrew was talking about, they're almost becoming like hedge funds. And so I think some, not all esports teams, but some may look to, buy up a bunch of assets in a first-person shooter, right? Like think of like a Valorant type game where they can go long like 50K of the best skins, and then they can rent those out to generate revenue. They can collateralize those to get a loan against them, so they can go still do other investments while holding on to those skins. And so, yeah, you may see some esports teams take on kind of like this bank-like unit, and I would welcome that. And I think we need to find other revenue streams for them.
Yeah, real quick on that note. Sorry, Arnold, but the scholarship model, as Chris mentioned, I'm not sure if folks are aware of what that term actually means. But in the Axie space, we had a really wise community member who realized I've got 1,000 Axies and I can only play with 3 Axies at a time. What if I start moving those Axies around to side accounts and make a whole bunch of them, and then give those accounts to people that are on the other side of the globe that can't afford to buy the assets but have a huge amount of time on their hands and would like to play? And then what if we fairly split those revenues, like 50-50 or 70-30, and then we both benefit from this system? It's a great example of how that background blockchain tech is securing those valuable assets, but then on the game layer, you can share access to the accounts, and that opens up the possibility for what kind of turns into a kind of trustless asset lending type scenario where scholars can come on and be able to earn with assets that they wouldn't have been able to afford to buy in the first place. And that creates a very interesting symbiotic relationship between scholar and manager. And I think part of why he chose to call them scholars is because it unlocks the gamification of people learning about the blockchain technology. You know, people coming in because they want to play the game, they want to be able to earn, but to do that, you have to figure out how to set up a wallet, how to do transactions, how to do an exchange to cash out, how to use DeFi, how to do all these kind of basic things in the Web3 space, and that has been a really powerful vehicle to try to bridge the gap and start bringing people into the ecosystem. And that basic layer of education is huge. And from a social impact perspective, a lot of those scholars joining are from developing countries, folks that don't have an easy way to get plugged into the global economy. There are a lot of places in the world where getting a simple bank account for a savings account is a very challenging thing to do. Credit doesn't exist. The ability to get a loan to buy a key piece of infrastructure doesn't really exist. So there is an actual use case for these decentralized finance tools, and getting them in the hands of the people that need them most can be a really powerful vehicle, especially if that vehicle has a key part in the gaming loop. So
That's a
yeah,
huge that's a huge point. If I can just quickly kind of double click on that. We're seeing a lot of players from Latin America, Southeast Asia, all of these emerging markets. And like Andrew was saying, they can't typically afford, they definitely can't afford a $99 gem package in a traditional mobile game, and they can't afford NFT assets in a Web3 game. And so there's so much talent in these emerging markets. And I think esports teams could actually do a large amount of good to help bank some of these players, to help them earn money for the first time so they can afford a laptop. We're seeing a lot of stories like that from the Axie community in the Philippines and other places where people are, for the first time, able to open up a small business or buy a desktop computer. So I think esports teams should really think about, how they can move into that space in a bigger way.
Speaking from an esports team perspective, I think a couple things that make me interested in this space in general. The first one is more of a business problem that I think this helps solve. The current model of esports is fundamentally broken, right? Publishers today in every single major title have not created meaningful digital revenue opportunities for esports organizations, right? And publishers won't do it until probably another couple years, when you're going to have about, I try to push on the idea of the esports winter coming. Like, we're going to have like 50-60% of esports organizations go bust over the next 2 to 3 years. Absolutely. And so once that happens, I think publishers will then create a more digital-led revenues an ecosystem. But anyway, so fundamentally, it's broken, right? You got to win worlds to get one team skin. Like, that's a really tough ask. And I'm not just saying that because we got to semifinals last year, but it's always a tough ask. I think the more important thing for me is, hey, there's obviously all the gaming talent is moving to Web3. They are the talent that makes great games. So one of these games is potentially going to be an incredible competitive game where we could be active in. But there's an opportunity here today where we could help construct a ecosystem and business model that actually makes sense, right? Imagine if somebody told you, "Hey, we're launching the next big League of Legends game, and we want you there we want to be there with you to help create an ecosystem where the business actually makes sense, right? And you can actually run an esports organization and be successful, right?" I think that is happening, and I think that's really exciting, is the ability to reinvent what a esports ecosystem business model should be. So for me, that gets me very excited. The problem with esports orgs and why they're not a really great fit for Web3, besides the community backlash, which is the easy one that like everybody points to, I feel that a lot of esports orgs lack the why of what their purpose is, right? So for us, it was a more natural fit because I've always believed that there's this new future coming called, I like to call it the gamer economy, right? Where for the first time, whether you're a pro player, a content creator, a student getting a scholarship into a university, you're actually being able to make a living, through your passion, through your love of games, right? And being good at it too. You gotta be good at it. I think that is kind of this meta idea that I see coming. And for me, one of the big things that's important for us and the reason why we've been navigating this space is our core goal is to help gamers earn a living, right? And especially the competitive side. And for me, that's kind of the core that I think a lot of other esports orgs don't have. So for us, we have obviously the pro players, we have content creators, but you also have a bunch of students. We actually have an education platform that actually teaches young students in all across Asia how to play games better in some of their favorite Web2 games, right? And so our goal behind that was to not only provide them opportunities and pathways into US universities or becoming a pro or becoming a content creator, or oftentimes just playing in a setting that teaches you not to be so toxic, right? So you can be a more well-adjusted individual. I play a lot of League before, so I understand like what the community is like at times. So for us, we want to help gamers earn a living. It seems like there's Web3 games, and especially on the competitive front end, what's coming in the pipe, where there's opportunities to expand that, right? So that's what gets me excited is the fact that right now there's been on average like 100 million League of Legends players. There's about 1,000 that become a pro. That is 0.01% chance of becoming a pro. What competitive Web3 does is expand the pie so that you don't have to be 0.01% to earn a living. You can be the top 10, 20%, right? And I think that's a really exciting opportunity where we're able to broaden the base of people that can earn a living through gaming. And so for me, that opportunity is a 100x opportunity. That's why we're so involved in it. At the same time, we're not out there pushing championship tokens or fan membership stuff because I'm like, I don't really understand it. I don't think it is like that exciting for me. But I kind of view it as like experiments on the way to progress. So I think these are necessary things, and it's just what do we want to build long term that I'm just trying to really understand and figure out still.
Yeah, if I could jump in on that real quick, I think you're exactly right, Arnold. The beauty here is if your game account is also your bank account in the Web3 world, if you have that wallet address attached to your username, it gets really easy from the developer side to be like, hey, let's just throw some rewards into your bank account. That doesn't really exist in the traditional gaming world in the same way it does in Web3. And that's where tools like community gaming come in. It's so easy to run these tournaments and automate the payout structure. That's amazing tooling for small, like experimental esports organizers, people that are just getting their feet wet and don't have that capital for moving capital around the world by traditional standards. And that's absolutely part of our ethos with esports is trying to spread the love a lot more and make these prize pools much less top heavy in tournaments and find ways to create that player journey where instead of it being you qualify and that's where the money is, if you don't make it, sorry, that's zero. And moving into a world where you can actually pick up a prize purse along the way as you progress through the qualifiers. And it's to me that is rather disruptive and makes esports much more approachable instead of being something kind of reserved for the upper elite 0.001% of the best players. And I like the way community gaming is creating this tooling where on the front end, it's really just a great tournament bracket software. But on the back end, it has these really amazing Web3 rails. So it's there for everyone. For someone like me, they're future proof and working on the same things that I want to see. But from a user perspective, a lot of those pain points are gone, and they've done a great job making it more seamless for new users to come in. I'm very bullish on that general model of making sure you're resonating with traditional gamers that are really just looking for that traditional user experience, but then integrating it with the technology that folks like me on the dev side are really keen on.
Yeah, and just to touch on that a little bit, the way it works when you customize your payouts is you can pay out up to 64 players, and so you would never really agree to pay someone $1 through PayPal, right? Like I'm going to pay out 30 people $1 each. But with a smart contract payment, you can actually customize it where, 33rd through 64th will each get $1 each. And this could be like a USDC digital dollar, right? And so what we've seen is that there's that initial educational hurdle, right? Where someone doesn't know what USDC is, or they may not have an exchange account yet where they can sign up and convert it. But once they get past that initial hurdle and they realize like, wow, my country has super high inflation and this is actually protecting me. This is protecting my purchasing power. It can make it so when I eventually need to pay my bills, I can convert it at that exact moment. But until then, I can transfer money around the world for cheap. I can buy assets. I can move in and out of these skins while I'm playing this game. That's a huge differentiator for people outside the U.S. where we only have 10% inflation, but other people have 20, 30, 40. I know we have employees in Turkey and it's like 70 to 100%. So that's really crazy. So to be able to have a digital dollar that you can just move around instantly is a really powerful tool.
And I think part of the reason for the backlash is that, it's a lot of it is based in big money grabs were the key in America versus for America, like crypto world, versus I think in a lot of developing countries, there's actual utility and use case for this, right? People are earning a living through this stuff, right? Because, a dollar goes a lot further out there, right? And so I think a lot of the backlash that we saw and we continue to see is because a lot of the stuff that people were peddling was just honestly garbage, right? And so, I think in a lot of ways the reputation was ruined, especially for the gaming audience. And, it's a very difficult position for, I think, a lot of esports orgs that don't have that kind of Asia reach to understand that there's something bigger going on. It's just maybe not starting out of America, right? So as an American, I feel like I can say that, like, we're Americans. We always think like America's the center of everything. But in this case, with a lot of the innovation that's happening, it's not, right? And the use case is not. And so I think, a lot of this backlash that we're seeing, a part of it is that, a lot of what's being sold and marketed in America is just kind of useless, right? And so it makes sense that as a gamer, it's like your game sucks. Why are you telling me to do this? Or, it's like I want to play a great game. I don't want to buy a shitcoin, right? And so I completely understand this backlash, and I also think I don't like the fact that there's a lot of people peddling really bad stuff out there with really bad tech, and you have a lot of folks that are talking about the tech without actually understanding it. It's really funny. I think there's in America there's like a one thing I've noticed is that if you talk to a lot of folks and the crypto bros out in the States, and you start asking them like fundamental questions about blockchain, like, hey, what does zero knowledge mean? And they'll be like, their eyes just glaze over because the only words they know is utility and NFT, right? And
Yeah.
so it's shocking to me how many people are in the crypto space that know nothing about the I'm not a engineer by trade, but like, you want to like study how stuff works, right? But I think what we're seeing the hangover effects of too many people jumping in for easy money grabs, and it really did a bad job it set us back in terms of actually moving the technology forward in a meaningful way. Sorry, I'm going on a little rant here, but it's just something that really annoys me.
Those same
because I've been
people
disturbed by this a
know
lot.
those same people know exactly what the new hottest generative art project is, right? But they don't know anything about smart contracts or token economies. So yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with you on that,
And
Joe.
even if you do know a little bit about token economies, I end up doing a little bit of free consulting in the space because I just want the space to succeed. And very often it comes back to, hey, we want to launch our tokens first. We got to launch the collections first. We want to launch our economy before we even really think about our core game loop. That is a failed thesis. That is never going to work. You will be playing this forever cat and mouse game trying to fix the holes in your economy because you have no foundation. If you think about a tautology, it doesn't matter if the logic's right if the premise is completely wrong. And that's a key part that I try to communicate to people. Like, figure out what your game is, make a great game, and then start adding economic layers that have meaningful impact and scalability where you're thinking about the future. So few people are thinking about the future. Most people are thinking about the short term right now, and it's horribly frustrating. I agree with you completely, Arnold.
Yeah, and when you go to decide to add a token, you really need to hire a token economist, which is real like a game economist, right? I'm not seeing enough of this. I'm not seeing real modeling exercises. There's I'm going to do a quick shout out to machinations.io. It's something that we're looking at where you can actually do, Monte Carlo simulations and really simulate user behavior, like, probabilities of people staking or doing this in a bull market and a bear market. And you can run thousands of simulations and kind of see what happens to your token economy in these different scenarios. And so, Axie is the pioneer here. And a lot of people just kind of copy and pasted Axie and like hoped for the best, and like they didn't hire the correct people. You need to have token sinks, right? I think the word token sink is going to become a lot more popular in the next year. You need to have money in. Does it equal money out? You need to really understand that stuff. And if you don't, you need to hire true economists that understand the gaming ecosystem to come in and help you.
I think you're on mute.
You're on mute.
I sure am. I double muted myself. How about that? Now, well, we got 5 minutes left in this this panel here. I think just to wrap things up here, one question that I have is, what do you all think will happen first? Will a top esports title bring in blockchain technology and make that super consumer facing, or will we see a big blockchain game become a major esports title? Which do you think will happen first?
So I think you have winner's dilemma happening. What I mean by that is I think the major publishers that are doing really well in the top esports titles don't want to risk their golden goose, right, by doing and adding anything, right? So they're waiting for somebody else to succeed. And when that happens, right, because there's just too much talent here, too many great, folks developing really great experiences first with more of a free-to-play focus and having a side rail that basically allows you to create a Web3 portion. I think that's going to happen first. That's where we're honestly interested more. That's why we're really interested in Axie and what you guys are doing with Origin, and that's why I've been noticing all the Hearthstone guys going over there and where the competitive players are going, right? Like, I think that is going to happen first, and my biggest thing that I think we need to work through is try to understand what game titles there will be, make smart bets in this space and invest our time, and we've already started. And I think that's what's going to happen first. And the other piece of advice that I have is, I think there was anytime somebody says they're going to launch a great game within a year, it's just don't buy that thing. Great games take many years. And so, for a while, I think anybody could say the words Web3 game and get funding. Now I think it's a little tougher, which is a good thing, because I saw some of these timelines, and we work with a lot of devs, and they were like, "Dude, you can't launch a game within a year. Like, that's just not a thing."
Yeah,
we're
and some of
seeing
the hiring. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I just had a small comment. Go ahead if you have a full answer here.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing Web 2 game designers start to come into the space. Axie has been hiring aggressively and bringing some of those folks in, and that was one of the very first things these senior game designers said is like, we need to recalibrate expectations internally, externally, across the entire stack, because we have great potential here, but it's going to take us a while to test this, do the R&D, get it in front of the audience, and get it to that polished state we know it can be, and we need to be realistic about how long that's going to take. I also think some of the traditional esports game devs are going to move a little bit slow, but I think it'll really come in building this next wave of IP or the next releases of these games. Transitioning a traditional game that already has an economic model into Web3 rails without kind of ruining it in the process, I think is exceptionally hard. What to me makes a lot more sense to me is like, hey, let's launch Hearthstone Web3 or whatever, where it's like that same concept, but you're restarting the economy with a different kind of economic structure. And doing that as well takes a lot of time to architect and plot out and really strategize to maximize. So I've heard some devs already starting to work in that direction of like, hey, let's leverage our IP to build a new gaming experience. So that way, if people don't like blockchain, they still have that traditional gaming experience. You can play the centralized game, but it's just creating more options for their user base. And I think that will start to chip away at some of this social doubt. And if those new Web3 games are actually good and actually do provide value for players, then that value will be hard for players to ignore, because most competitive players are min-maxers at heart, right? That's what they do for a living. So if we can provide the value and the utility of these tools, then I think gamers will flock.
Yeah, so I think it's actually going to be a traditional game developer first, and I think that's the answer because it's going to happen really soon. I mean, you have Krafton, for instance, that already announced plans to integrate NFT tech into PUBG and their other games, right? So I think it's going to happen first in Asia, right? In South Korea, Japan, China, right? Come to us. There's a bunch of games that all already announced it, right? They're pushing past the American polarization, and they're moving forward with it. But the West, I think, is going to be fast followers, right? I think you're going to see Riot and Blizzard. They're all thinking about it now. Like I can tell you right now, they're all thinking about it. They're all seeing like this is not the right time. Like let's just research, R&D now. Maybe next year we'll decide to do something. And I think it'll probably be on the esports side first, right? I don't think you're going to see, Valorant skins anytime soon, but you'll probably see, like 100 Thieves did, some sort of digital trophy or digital collectibles that can help, celebrate and complement what we're doing in the esports world already. And but that said, I think the indie developers are within the next year going to launch a bunch of what I call AA plus games, right? Maybe they're not quite AAA, but first-person shooters. You already have, of course, you have Origins, but you have like Skyweaver. It's a great game that I actually like better than Hearthstone, even before they turned on the features. And so, Storybook Brawl, that's another one I've been playing, and they announced that they're going to add, they got bought by FTX, they announced they're going to add NFTs as well. So I think you're going to see them over time kind of meld, right? And it's going to be like, well, what does it even mean to necessarily be a blockchain-enabled game? And I think you're going to see, in the next 5 years, all the Western developers will do it, but they're going to be fast followers, not first movers.
Got it. Well, we are at time. I wanted to thank Arnold, Andrew, and Chris for joining us today and talking about everything about innovation on the blockchain. This is a really